and welcome to the M.B.Om podcast, where you'll learn to master the business of yoga. M.B.Om is a proud part of the Wander Barn Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Amanda Kingsmith. I'm a 500-hour registered yoga teacher, a yoga business coach, and a total business geek. Here at M.B.Om, you'll learn everything you need to know to create a sustainable yoga business by learning from myself and guests from around the world about how they built their yoga businesses, and about how you too can become a successful yoga teacher, studio owner, and much more. All right, let's dive in. Hello there, and welcome back for another episode of the M.B.Om podcast. I'm really excited that you're joining me for today's episode of the show. And this episode of the podcast is brought to you by OfferingTree. OfferingTree is your one-stop shop for all things yoga business. So whether you're looking for a website, a platform to schedule live online classes on, something for video on demand, memberships or courses, OfferingTree really does it all. And I'm going to tell you more about OfferingTree a little bit later on in this episode. So stay tuned for that. And make sure that you check them out at offeringtree.com/MBM. And you can get a little discount there if you do decide to sign up. This week on the podcast, I'm really excited to be joined by my dear friend, Chelsey Breta Orth. Breta and I first met in our very first teacher training program in Bali back in 2015. And she was one of my very first podcast guests. I think she was like episode number 2 or 3 or something like that. And since then, I've watched her discover her niche and create a business that she loves called Moonrise Ritual. And so in this episode, Breta shares her journey of teaching at yoga studios, stepping back to work on her own practices, discovering her passion for moon cycles, and syncing to the rhythms of nature and our bodies, and how this has led her to develop a business that helps others connect to their own rhythms and moon cycles. She also shares the business lessons that she's learned along the way, which are really, really beautiful. So there's lots of goodness in this episode, and it was really fun to come back together and create another podcast together after so many years of, watching each other grow and learn as yoga teachers. So I hope that you enjoyed this episode as much as me. And without further ado, here is Breta. Breta, welcome to the podcast today. I'm really excited to have you here with me today.
Thank you so much, Amanda. It's so great to be back.
Yeah. So for those people who might be wondering, who you are and all this stuff, you were actually like my second guest on the show back in 2016, one of my dearest friends from yoga teacher training. And you've been through a huge, huge, huge transformation, huge journey over the last 6-7 years since we did training together. And then the last, 5-6 years since we podcast together. So maybe, do you want to start? We can just back up to that point and you can tell me, what you've been up to since you and I were baby yoga teachers back in 2016.
Yeah, I would love to. I think about us being little baby yoga teachers and like fresh out of our 200-hour. And I remember our teacher sharing, you should really develop your own practice before you start teaching. And my impulsiveness was like, I'm just going to start teaching. And then I was thinking about it in the last couple of years as she was so right to have developed my own practice, because there's so much wisdom gained within the body and the physical practice to actually be able to share from a deeper well of knowledge, wisdom, and spirituality within the yoga practice. So I shout out to Sunny Richards for that. Thank you for that reminder. And it came back all these years later. So she definitely planted a seed. Let's see. When I got back from Bali with you, Amanda, I had moved right back into Bozeman, Montana. I was living out there and I started teaching for 2.5 years. And really, this whole story is an unfolding of my life's journey. I was teaching morning classes. It felt best for me. I also skied a lot out in Bozeman. And then I worked an evening part-time job in a restaurant. And over those 2.5 years, I came to a space of burnout. I was literally teaching yoga from an empty cup and wasn't showing up for my students in the way that showed up in integrity or that my heart really desired anymore. And it took me moving out of Montana out to Northern California and living on a goat ranch to really understand the level of like exhaustion and burnout that I was experiencing. And so I guess this is kind of where my life like really expanded open. So in 2017, I remember reaching out to Amanda and I was saying, hey, I really want to start a yoga website. How do I do that? I was like really fresh into this whole idea of even the technology part of yoga because I had just been teaching in person and that felt really good. So after a couple of failed attempts of like trying to create a website that felt good, instead of like marinating and allowing the creativity to come through, my impulsiveness was like, I'm creating a website. I'm going to do this. And then I didn't have any drive to steer the website or to steer the career of where I wanted to go. So that was in January of 2017. In October of that year, I ended up moving out to the goat ranch. And I really had to have this big reset in my life that I had actually lost my moon cycle for 5 months due to the stress and the exhaustion. And so when I moved back out to the ranch, my moon time had come back a couple of weeks later, which I thought was amazing that I could just completely relax and lounge at this ranch for a little while. And I had a safe space to do that. And I wasn't having all these responsibilities or tending to other people's responsibilities either. And at this moment, it was this very big clearing in my life to say, okay, this is a starting over point for you. And within that, I rested and found a new trajectory for my life. I did set a new moon intention to learn how to live sustainably. And I actually found Allison's Ranch. And then everything unfolded. So I heard the calling to go back and get my 300-hour yoga training. So I went down to Costa Rica and studied with soul work down there and met one of my favorite teachers, Usha Anandi of Women Wellness. And she described the moon cycle and moon cycle scheduling and how we can adapt our lives to live in this cyclical way within the menstruation of female bodies, right? And how society is really set up for a linear or a masculine way that, hormonally for male bodies is more linear and doesn't fluctuate as much, where female bodies hormonally change 4 distinct times throughout the month, and it's a cyclical process. So I was really shown that down in Costa Rica. And I came home, was still living on the ranch. I lived there for 2 years. And I'll mention that Allison is an elder and she is 65 now. And so she really took me under her wing and guided me to learning the cycles of nature, growing a garden, how to tend to livestock, what their different needs are throughout the seasons. In the summertime, it's really dry in Northern California, so she had to bring hay in. And then in the fall, winter, and spring, there was some green grass and other things for the goats to eat, right? So it was just this way of how do you manage your life according to cycles? And then I realized that life was showing me these moments that I needed to experience and remember on my own in order to have the inspiration to create what I now have as a business called Moonrise Ritual. And it was within this solitude and quietude being at the ranch where I really was able to dive into, I want a deeper connection with spirit. How do I get there? So December of 2017, right? So 4 years ago, at the time of this recording, I said, I need to have a morning practice of meditation and at least 20 minutes of yoga stretching and movements. And so I started doing that. And it's been about 4 years that I've kept a morning ritual or routine pretty consistent throughout those years. There's always times where, in the height of summer, I'm really busy and life is calling me elsewhere. But it was in those moments where I was creating this ritual within myself to show up for myself every day and have a grounding point to move from. And when we do that throughout the seasons, we really get to see an expansion that comes through where we get to see how life works on the natural level and connect back to the earth's rhythm and not be so distracted or pulled by the external energies. And it's a fine balance because now I have yoga for the moon cycle on my website, and it's a membership. So I offer yoga there. So it's still showing up with technology, and it's still showing up and having a garden to grow throughout the year. And now it's a balance of how can I incorporate all these things in my world and bring it down into, one package where I've really gotten to sit with all of that and allow life to show me where I needed to go. And it was really trusting my inner guidance and my heart's desires in order to find this path and stick with the yoga that was really calling me. So we'll bring it back to Sunny saying that we need to have our own practice and develop our own practice. And when I was on the ranch and started that practice of the morning ritual 4 years ago, all of a sudden I would sit in my yoga practice at home and meditate, and then, move into a really simple practice. So it'd be like low lunges, and hip openers and some core work. But when I gave myself that space, I was able to do so much healing within myself, get down to some of the root causes of maybe why I felt a discomfort in my mind or in my body. And it even brought me back to some childhood perceived discomforts or like mini traumas that, as a child, you don't know how to regulate properly. And so I was able to use my yoga practice in that way and enrich my life to this sense of fulfillment. And now, since I've been able to go into that depth of my own self and being and honor my moon cycle while I was doing that, I brought forward yoga for the moon cycle. So this yoga for the moon cycle is videos that are distinguished within the 4 hormonal phases of a cyclical female body. And, so when we're in our moon time, it's really slow yin yoga. When we're in our ovulation expression, which is the height of our cycle, we have a more vinyasa-based practice, higher movement, and maybe a little bit faster, and then hatha on each side of that to make this whole cycle. So yeah, it's just been a really nice journey so far to have life show me and allow it to unfold and be open for that opportunity.
Yeah, thanks for sharing all of that. That's such a beautiful story. And I think it's really interesting because I remember Sunny saying that too, that piece of wisdom about like find your practice. And I very much did the same thing as you, where I just jumped in and started teaching. And I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with that. I think, getting into your teaching when you're so, green and eager is such a great way to learn. But I think for both of us, like after that, the period of time of teaching in studios, I think both of us kind of stepped back and were like, okay, I've like got some experience teaching now. Like, what do I actually want to do? How do I actually want to serve people? And I think it's interesting that you were able to kind of listen to your body, your mind, your intuition, connect with spirit to be able to figure out like what that next path looked like. And I'm curious, did you teach at studios like at all during that period? Like since you moved from Montana, have you really been a part of like the yoga studio culture?
I tapped into a yoga studio and I was a substitute teacher there for a little while. And then I was working a part-time job that turned into a full-time job, and I needed the financial aspect to be really grounded. And because there wasn't a lot of space for me to be teaching full-time, that sort of drifted away. But I did end up offering yoga in the park. And that was so fun because in Southern Oregon, so I'm really close to there in Ashland, there's a really beautiful park called Lithia Park, and it's pretty famous. It has all these gorgeous flowers throughout the spring and beautiful autumn colors. And it's a pretty deep park. It kind of follows up to the reservoir of the water holding for Ashland. And so I would just set out in one of the front lawns and have an open invite. I put flyers around town, and I did that for a spring and an autumn season, and people really loved it. It was really fun to be out in nature and practice in that way. And I really wanted to bring that natural aspect back to yoga. Like, how does it feel to practice out in nature and be in that sense? So then I also found myself at a healing center. So there was some therapists there and a back movement studio. And so I offered like Foundations of Yoga 101, where it was a 6-week course. So I ended up moving more into like yoga programs where I could teach, what I had learned in yoga training on a really small scale for people who are just interested in getting to know a little bit more about yoga. So I've taught on and off down here in Southern Oregon and the Northern California area. And now I've really just moved online, especially after the last couple of years in the state of the world. It feels more comfortable to do that at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. That definitely makes sense. And, all the work that you've done over the last few years is kind of like, I guess, traditionally in business, we would say that would be like your niching down process. And so I'm curious for you, like, I know this was such a part of your own personal journey, like losing your own moon cycle, kind of healing that, resetting that, using your own practices to kind of bring that back, and then being like, oh, okay, well, I could support other people with this. But can you walk me through like a little bit more in detail, just what this process of discovering, like, hey, I like this yoga thing. I like teaching yoga, but there's more to this that I really want to share with the world. Can you walk me through like that process of discovery?
Yeah, I love the term niching down, because when I had reached out to you, like, I want to build a website, I think it was so new to me, like, well, what am I going to offer? And what is my niche? And how does that look? And I remember feeling so confused about it. And I'll go back to say, I really had this desire to have a niche, and then I had to open up to it to see what was really going to come through. So I'm going to backtrack a little bit further back to about 2012. I had actually come off hormonal birth control and learned fertility awareness method and read the book Taking Charge of Your Fertility by Toni Wechsler. And in this moment, I was able to read and teach myself how to come off hormonal birth control to prevent pregnancy in a way that was natural within my own hormonal matrix. So I have a history of tending to my moon cycle in that way, where I knew the distinct phases of ovulation and when I would have my moon time within my own body. But I didn't have the key aspect of a moon cycle schedule and the 4 hormonal phases that come along with the moon cycle. And so it was really after that yoga training in Costa Rica with Usha and Nandi, she was explaining in detail, like, oh yeah, when you're on your moon time, rest. And all of a sudden, one day, I was just open to receive this. And I was like, I can teach moon or yoga for the moon cycle, and really niche down to working with cyclical bodies, female bodies, and women, and have this journey to share what I learned on my own. So it was my own practice at first. And I had really, really strong boundaries within myself that if I was on my moon time, I completely cleared my schedule and just was with myself, or I was living with Allison and we laid really low key. I didn't do a lot of ranch work, heavy duty lifting or anything, or I didn't schedule myself to be busy or be social. I really needed that reset after losing my moon cycle. So it's kind of been its own journey, but life was showing me this the entire time. And all I had to do was just back up and get out of my own way, that this was going to be how I would have my own niche. And it was just really authentic to my own journey, in that sense that this is what I've been doing and this has worked. And I want to offer that to other people, because so often we're in this society where we're saying we have to do everything, push beyond our fatigue, and then it's exhaustion, right? And then we hit burnout, push beyond. If we're not showing up 24/7 or on point or in our best selves all the time, then our value decreases. And we're seeing this big movement within like womb energy or feminine people on Instagram, or they're working within the feminine aspects and really talking about value and self-worthiness. Well, I brought that all back into moon cycle scheduling, that if we can actually rest on our moon time and have a nice yin yoga practice, then we get to allow the body to nourish itself and refresh itself, essentially a reset before we have another, 26 to 33 day cycle of our unique cycle that we all have. And then we get to work with it. So I was doing that for myself, and I saw the need for so many other women because of my own journey of burnout. And it took 2 years really before I wanted to share publicly again in yoga. And so during those 2 years, it really was like, I bet you so many more women and cyclical beings want this information. So that's really how I listened. And I've always been a big believer that my inner guidance or spirit is going to show me where I need to go. And it has also been a trust process that, okay, you had this dream, you want to have a website and you want to offer yoga. And now it was just listening. Here's my own personal story. I've experienced that, so I can relate to someone else who might be experiencing that same thing. So
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, I think it's just such a beautiful journey. And I know, that my journey has been, has a lot of kind of unique cross points with yours as well, like going off birth control in 2012 and also losing my moon for a period of time. And then kind of discovering this like cyclical way of living. And I feel like that was something that was really new for me at the time that I did discover it. And I think you actually introduced me to it first through Woman Code by Elisa Vitti. And I just felt like this feels so intuitive. Like, why haven't I been thinking about this? Instead, I was the type of person that I'd be exhausted during menstruation and I'd be, pushing myself to go to the gym and to continue to work and all these things. And it's like, well, no wonder I have like, PMS symptoms and painful cramps. It's like my body is literally shouting at me, like, slow down, and I'm not listening. And I think that it's so interesting because even being in this space of health and wellness, like I would say I have quite a bit of, awareness, both mind, body, and spirit, yet it was easy for me to kind of like tune that out because, society tells you to live otherwise. And so it is a very, very beautiful journey to kind of go into that, to dive into that and really tune into what your body's doing as a woman each month.
Mm-hmm. And, I want to play off of that is we are not shown how to live cyclically, right? I would say that the Industrial Revolution really started to have a play with all of this, that, all of a sudden women weren't shown the way of how to live cyclically. Yet if we take it back pre-Industrial Revolution, all women were cyclical with the moon and were most likely bleeding with the new moon because it was dark, and then ovulating with the full moon. And so if we have to that far back, our ancestors are long gone by that point, from the Industrial Revolution era, that it might not have been passed down in a way through our lineage or our families, or, I even bring it back to my mother. She let me skip school when I had my moon time in high school, which was really nice because she told me she got tired and I still saw her working. But some days, like maybe once or twice a year, she'd actually call in as a sick day to take that for herself. So I actually really attribute that to my mother. Thank you, Mary, for showing that to me. But we don't see that a lot. Maybe not within our families, but we certainly don't see that within the workforce, modeled to women to schedule their most important projects or meetings around ovulation. And, depending where you are, if you're working a corporate job, or if you're like running your own studio, can you have help and ask for help when you're on your moon time to actually have that rest and reset? But like I'm saying, we're just not shown all of that information. And I feel like one of the pieces I really appreciated from Allison being an elder in my life is that she was able to pass down so much information. So I really have this dream that the generation of women right now learning about moon cycle scheduling, reading books such as Women Code by Alyssa Vitti, or the book In the Flow by her as well, or Wild Power by Alexandra Pope and Shawnee Hugo. They're so important, right? We learn the ways to work with the cycle. But we get to be those ancestors or those elders for you're having a baby girl. You get to share this with her, or we get to pass that all down to the next generations. And this work isn't just for women. This is also for men as well, to understand that women are hormonal or hormonally changing. That's a better term I'd like to use throughout the month. So, we just have to work with the energies, and we're always communing with other people. And the more that people know about this, the better off and more supported that everyone can feel in their lives.
Hey, yoga teachers. We're just taking a quick break from the podcast to talk about OfferingTree and memberships. If you teach regular yoga classes, do you offer a membership? When you start to have a loyal group of students who show up for you week after week, creating a membership is a great way to transition to reliable income that you can count on. You all know that I recommend OfferingTree as your online yoga business one-stop shop, and that's because OfferingTree makes it easy to set up and grow your membership on top of everything else that you're doing in your business. When you use OfferingTree, you can create memberships that include unique bundles of classes, courses, and on-demand offerings. And you can set up as many memberships as you want. You can charge clients monthly, annually, weekly, or choose your own billing cycle with OfferingTree's membership tools. And if reoccurring payments don't fit, you can also sell packages that can be refilled when needed. And as always, it's super simple to learn this aspect of OfferingTree and to set it up. So if you've been looking for an easier way to run the online part of your yoga business, definitely check out OfferingTree. It's an easy, all-in-one tool to host your website, schedule classes, private lessons, and sell memberships. And I have a special discount for you. Head on over to OfferingTree.com/M.B.O for 15% off 1 year of OfferingTree or 50% off the first 3 months. Once again, that's OfferingTree.com/M.B.O for a special discount on OfferingTree. All right, now back to the show.
I love that. And yeah, I love the idea of being able to pass this knowledge on to future generations, like learning from the generations that came before us and then pass it on. And, hopefully there'll be more people in the world just kind of understanding that we don't have to necessarily be in the grind all the time and hustle, hustle, hustle. And kind of on that note, you sort of mentioned this before, is like this balance of, your business is all online and, you are running this business while also kind of honoring yourself, your body, as well as like the cycles of nature. And I feel like this is one of the things that can get really complicated in our heads as humans, where we're like, well, how do I pull away from the grind while still like running a business? And I think you've done such a beautiful job of finding this balance. And I know it's been a lot of work over the years. Can you share a little bit about that? Because I'm sure there's somebody listening who's like, yeah, I mean, that's great that you like schedule your menstruation off, but like, how the heck am I supposed to do that?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, because I'll have to say that I live in a way where throughout the rest of the year, spring, summer, autumn, I really save money. So in the wintertime, I can really work part-time. And it allows, so if we think on a granular scale of cyclical living, in the winter, if you experience the winter where you're living, it's really time to turn inwardly, slow down. It's December when we're recording this right now. All I've been doing is taking care of my body and practicing yoga in front of the fire and, trying, if I have things scheduled, it's like I have a few things scheduled in the week, but I'm not stacking my days super hard. So I'm sharing this because when I lived on the ranch, I was working a seasonal job and I didn't have much work in the winter. So I really laid low and in that moment is when I heard the call to create Moonrise Ritual. And I was like, oh, and then it led me to a good friend of mine who's my graphic designer, and she threw together a website for me. And it was just like, okay, when we slow down, we're able to process the rest of the year. So if we're talking about the seasonal changes here, and then when we slow down, well, what wants to come through? What feels creative? What feels enticing and exciting in that slowness? And when we listen to that, we're actually following our soul's path or our heart's desire. So I'll have to say again that I set myself up financially to be able to just wind down in the winter. And it's where I felt my most creative to move forward in my business while also having to develop this huge trust in spirit that everything I need is being provided to me. And there have been plenty of times of moments of scarcity within my being where I'm like, okay, well, I really want to do this. Is it really going to work out? And I question myself. And every single time that I've been able to really let go, I've been provided for in every single area that I've needed. And so it's really this relationship with spirit that the universal energy is always going to support me. It's been a really hard thing to come into and feel safe to be able to kind of let go and pull away from my business in the winter and not put so many things out per se, but really allow that creative juice to align me and set me up for the rest of the year. And yeah, and I have to say, it's just like pull away and I'm always provided for. And it is always shown up in ways that I would have maybe not thought of, but it's always happened. And I say ways where I'm supported financially, that's kind of been my journey the last couple of winters. Okay, my money is coming up. It's February or March, and I need my seasonal work to pick back up. Is that picking back up? And okay, yes, just in the right moment, everything has always worked out for me. But imagine this, if we do pull away, and maybe it looks differently for you because this can be a unique process for everyone. But if we pull away, instead of pushing and pumping out courses and products and whatever it looks like within your business, if we can pull away for a little bit, what can really brew within that space that we give ourselves? Because if we're continually pushing and not listening and receiving, then I feel like, we just continue on that linear path. Like we have to be opening to all of that or be pursuing or producing something. And at some point, are we allowing the authenticity to move through? And this, I say this maybe in the preface of like an online business where you could step away for a little while. Might be different, like running a yoga studio, or maybe you do, and someone else like steps in for you so you can have a rest and reset during the winter months or during your moon time. So it's just been a really big trusting process. And one thing I'll say too is within my own moon cycle, when I'm in my luteal phase, which would be inner autumn or the PMS phase, I feel like a little bit of scarcity sometimes if I don't feel supported enough or grounded. And I've noticed that it really shows up in that time. It's when our inner critic is the loudest. And then I just am like, no, I'm trusting. It's only like a week of my time, but why do I feel like I don't have everything that I need at this moment? And then I'll move through my moon time. And then all of a sudden I'm building my energy again and everything comes flooding in. So it's been really interesting to see how my business works within my own moon cycle, that I feel really abundant around ovulation and that things just slow down naturally when I'm almost to my moon time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, both like kind of monthly and then also seasonally. And I really love the idea of taking a break, like whatever that looks like. And I think that this is one of the hardest things when we're entrepreneurs or we work for ourselves or we're like a solopreneur, especially like if we're a one woman, one man show, it's like, well, who's going to check the emails and who's going to send the email newsletter and, who's going to promote all this stuff. And it can be very scary to think about like stopping that momentum. But I really love the idea of giving ourselves breaks, whatever that looks like, if it's a summer break for you or a winter break or, whatever it is, even if it's just giving yourself a couple weeks off around like the holidays or something like that, where you just step away. I think that that's a really beautiful practice to get into a couple times a year, because we do need that space. And you're completely right. Like when we give ourselves that space, I feel like that's when we have the time for creativity, because it's like we've hopped off the hamster wheel and now we can kind of like stop and look around us and see like how beautiful the world is around us and give us that time and space mentally. And I know that that's something that I've been focusing on in my business the last couple of years, is more time and space away from it. And it's like, that is always when I have new ideas. The ideas don't come when I'm like in the daily grind. It's like when I give myself some time and space from what I'm doing, that's when I'm like, oh, this is this other thing I could create or do, or, whatever, because I'm actually giving myself that chance to recharge.
Mm-hmm. And I was just thinking about, I've seen in this podcast in particular, like you take seasonal breaks and then come in with another season. And it's like, okay, well, people are doing that. And can we role model that even more for people to like have that refresh, or, for you to schedule these interviews and then give yourself time to edit them and then put them out. And so actually this will be post dated, but for winter solstice, I'm hosting a 40-day social media detox challenge, and I'm offering it for free because I am so easily distracted by Instagram. And that's like my main social media platform. But I'm just going to completely delete it for 40 days from winter solstice to the next seasonal cycle of Imbolc, which is the midway between winter and spring. And I'm just going to allow myself to have a deep cleanse, because so often I love Instagram. I love seeing all the creative people out there and what they're offering. And at some level, there is a little bit of competition, I would say in a healthy way, but I'm like, oh my gosh, look what she's doing. What can I offer? And it's just like, maybe not even competition, but like a comparison. Am I doing enough? And so then I question my value, and am I worthy to even put something out like that? So yeah, I'm taking this 40 days off from Facebook, from Instagram. I'm not a TikTok user, so like whatever else is out there. I do appreciate TikTok, and every once in a while, like friends are like, hop on and look, but it's just not something that I do. So I'm offering people this chance to have a winter reset and completely pull away from things that distract us, so we can really go inwardly and say what actually wants to come forward this next year, what wants to be birthed within my own business. And so I'm already getting all these ideas of what I want to create for the next year. What does my first quarter look like? What does my second quarter look like? What are the big pieces that I'm going to be sharing in the first and second quarters? And I was thinking about that before our call, actually. And like, what are the other supplemental factors that are going to be there and in place for me while, and like, what else wants to come through, right? And like listening while we take a break.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. I think that's a really beautiful offering. So
it's hard to step away from Instagram because we think I have thought, I don't know if everyone, that my whole business runs on Instagram, that I need that constant engagement. And it's like, well, I have an email list, and those people that are really invested in me, if they want to work with me, they can join on that. And I don't have to rely just solely on Instagram.
Yeah, 100%. I've definitely felt that too, like kind of this idea of like scarcity mindset, or even like FOMO a little bit of like, will people forget about me when I'm like offline for like a month or something like that, which is just, I mean, totally human, but also so silly, right? Like it's, I think so many of us have experienced that, but also just like a reminder, if you need a break, like take a break. It could be really beautiful for your business, because I think people can sense like that energy of tiredness, exhaustion, burnout. It's not inspiring. And if we're not inspired by what we're doing, how are other people supposed to get inspired?
Exactly. Yeah.
And so can you share a little bit about like the different offerings you have set up in your business, just so we can get like kind of a picture of how you've decided to set everything up?
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for asking. So I have an online membership for Yoga for the Moon Cycle, and that you can join anytime you want. And it's just on moonriseritual.com. And so that is something that's ongoing, and I have videos added to it monthly. So, they'll just rotate out. So we have yin, hatha, vinyasa in the cyclical way. I also offer the Art of Flow, which is a 6-week group mentorship, allowing people to remember what it feels like to be in the natural rhythm of flow. This is specifically geared towards women. So, how do you set yourself up to, get all your projects done during ovulation? If you're working for someone else, or you're working for yourself, or maybe you're a stay-at-home mother, how do you have all of that energy to be put external in ovulation? And then we bring it back inwardly during the moon time. And how do we ask for support? Do you budget a sitter for your kids if you're a stay-at-home mom? Even if you're in the house, or a grandparent, can those people support your children while you go take 2 or 3 hours to do a ritual, or to journal, or, take a bath? Or how does that look within the business world too? So I really keep it open to all women who really want to understand that sense of moon cycle scheduling. But we really learn the grounding foundation and the basics of creating a morning ritual. So you remember to check in with yourself every day, and then observe what's your relationship like with your moon cycle. So the idea of flow, when we learn the cyclical ways of the moon cycle, then we can actually be in ease and grace more in our lives. Not every cycle is going to be rainbows and butterflies, but can we start to reduce those secondary symptoms we call PMS? Because we see that happening a lot. It's a common thing, but it's actually not normal within the moon cycle. So we want to anchor you into having an easeful moon cycle anyways. But if we overexert ourselves, we start to see those PMS symptoms come up. So those are my 2 main offerings that I have right now. And you can always work one-on-one with me within the context of moon cycle scheduling and the Art of Flow. And we just gauge where you're at and where you might want to continue advancing within these programs, or just one-on-one. And then I'm excited to share that the 2nd annual Conscious Uplevel Summit will be hosted over the spring equinox. And last year, for the first one, I interviewed 30 women who work within the realms of cyclical living. And this was so broad. It was within birth work, postpartum doula work, seasonal foragers, so herbalists, or people foraging for other foods or mushrooms out in the wild, or working with plant medicines and the cycles that plant medicines or psychedelics can take us on a journey and really teach us in that process of walking with the plant medicine and then coming back and having that integration cycle. So I really kept it broad because I had this feeling that so many people were interested in what cyclical living all is about, and seasonal cooking, right? So in the spring, we eat more leafy greens, and in the winter and fall, we want to eat more root vegetables and stews and broths. So I'm really excited for this next year. I have a lot of women in mind to bring on and further advance the Conscious Uplevel Summit. And it's a free summit that will be launching over the spring equinox weekend. And you can join for free just to continue your education base. So that's my one big thing I have going on for Moonrise Ritual for my first quarter. And then the second quarter, I'm hosting a retreat in Montana with my good friend Leanne. And we're hosting Awaken to Your Sensual Body retreat, where we get to dive into that stillness and that undercurrent that is always within us, but really get to know all senses of the body and have pleasure within all senses and be with women in a really beautiful way.
Amazing. So much good stuff there. And I want to have links and stuff for all that, but maybe I'll ask you my last question before we get there. I'm curious if you And we've talked a little bit about this. I think we've kind of weaved it throughout, but have there been any kind of major like business lessons that you've learned like throughout your career that you want to share with listeners today?
That's a great question. Let me sit with that for a moment. I think all the times that I've tried to build a website and think that I was ready were teaching me that essentially it's like this term of failure was just not the right alignment, and that I was actually being shown for something greater, and that I really had to lean into that trust. And if you are so passionate that you want to have your own business and you want to share that with the world, then you'll know exactly when the right timing is to offer something. And if it doesn't feel like 100% hell yeah, then it's probably not the exact timing. Although on the back end of that, it's going to take a lot of work. So it might not feel like a hell yeah all the time when you're actually building it. But if you had that initial yes energy that this is what you're going to do, then keep sticking with it. I have had setbacks and then I'd move forward and then another setback. And my partner would be saying to me, all of these really successful people were going through the same thing. And the early stages of where you're at and building this business is just growth spurts for you to see where you can realign to even more growth. And, if you didn't see the numbers you wanted to see in a particular thing, well, offer it again and the numbers will come. And so just keep believing in yourself that even if it doesn't feel exciting all the time, because especially myself as a solopreneur, like it takes a lot of energy. And I just have to keep believing and trusting that it's all going to turn out the way that I dream about it in my mind's eye.
Yeah, for sure. That's really beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And it reminds me, I was just talking with a friend the other day who started a new business and he just launched his first program. And he was saying like, oh, it did like pretty well. I got like 15 people into the membership. And I was like, dude, that's amazing. Like, that's an amazing first launch. And he was like, yeah, I guess it's just like I hear about all these like, $10,000, like 6-figure launches. And I'm like, yeah, but nobody who's teaching how to do a 6-figure launch just did their first launch. Like their first launch was not a 6-figure launch. Like we all start somewhere. And I think that starting small is very, very normal. And just like you said, like if you don't get as many people, do it again. And hopefully you'll get more people the next time that you do that thing. And the more people you get on your email list, the bigger reach you have. And, like we're not going to start out with thousands and thousands of people buying our courses and products and memberships. It's like we have to grow that slowly. So I definitely feel aligned with that.
Yeah. And I grow it slowly and organically within the energy that I have within my moon cycle throughout the entire year. And so I'm just going to this is my work and this is what I share now. So I know it's a lot of moon cycle talk, but it's really the lever that I've needed to step into this work and really share that with everyone. And yeah. And, think if you had 15 people in person, if his membership's online, think of 15 people in person, that feels like a lot. Or all of a sudden you have 50 people in your membership, okay, you need a bigger space now to host 50 people. So it's just going to keep growing. And we're all starting from something. And maybe it might not be a big platform. It might not be these $10,000 launches, and that's okay. We can get there. And if that's what you're aspiring to do, then just watch it happen, because if you're in the right alignment, it will open in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really cool that you're very much like living the way that you teach. Like, I think that that's a really beautiful thing. And that's something that's going to draw people into working with you. Because I think if you're teaching people like, hey, don't offer things in your menstruation, and then you're in the middle of your menstrual time and you're like, running a retreat or something, then people might be like, oh, that's a bit strange, So I love that you're like really living the teachings that you teach, which is really beautiful. And I think that's also something that from the practice of yoga, I think we were taught very early on in our 200 hour, like practice what you preach.
Yeah. And, when I had that lesson of teaching in Bozeman for those 2.5 years, I was teaching from that empty cup. And, people still enjoyed my classes, although it wasn't like so rich. And I really didn't have that extra energy to give. And I just told myself I didn't want to do that again. And I want to show up with integrity. And that is one of my biggest values that I've realized over the last 5 years or I guess like 3 years, is integrity is so huge for me. And yeah, like I'm not going to teach you how to cyclical live if I'm not doing it myself.
Yeah,
That'd be
for
silly.
sure. Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And it's, beautiful that one of your values is integrity. That's definitely one of mine in my business too. Breta, can you share where people can go to learn more about you, where they can find you, maybe sign up for the conference and that type of thing?
Yeah. So you can find all of my work on moonriseritual.com. I'm on Instagram when it's not the middle of winter at moonrise.ritual. And I share relevant things there. And then if you're interested in joining the free Conscious Uplevel Summit, it's simply consciousuplevelsummit.com. And you can go ahead and sign up and register. And I think it will run from the 16th of March through the 20th or 21st. So it'll be a Wednesday through Sunday or Monday. I'm finalizing those dates, but it'll be all online once you go and search for it.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time today and for just catching up with me and sharing, the beauty that has been your journey over the last couple of years.
Thank you so much, Amanda. It's such a pleasure to be able to share that and share how I was niching down and how life just unfolded for me in this beautiful way, and how all these seeds were planted early on in my young 20s to be able to manifest in my late 20s and early 30s. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, friends, I hope that you enjoyed that episode of the podcast with Chelsey Breta Orth. If you did enjoy that and you really enjoy the conversation around moon cycles and rhythms with nature, we did a really fun episode for my other podcast, Matcha Mornings. So you can check that out at wanderbarn.com and just search for Chelsey Breta and you'll be able to find that episode that we did. It's all about going into how the rhythms of our cycles link with the moon and link with the seasons, and how we can really connect to that in the practices that we do day to day. So that's a really fun episode. And a huge thank you to OfferingTree for sponsoring this episode of the show. Make sure you go check them out at OfferingTree.com/M.B.O. And if you have any questions about their software or if it might be right for you, you can email them support@OfferingTree.com. And of course, a huge thank you to you for listening to this episode of the podcast. I couldn't do it without you. So thank you so much for being here. All right, I'll see you next week. Bye for now.